to hit the record button. So again, that's started. So for GDPR purposes, just to know, a recording will be made of this and we'll be uploading it to the SVL YouTube channel about 2 o'clock this afternoon. So it will be available. Can I welcome everybody today? This is the 5th in the homeworking series. It's an initiative we started here in SVL about 2 months ago during lockdown to try and keep communicating, trying to get some good subjects out into the contact centre partner world that we have to talk about what's going on and just discuss some issues. We're doing it in Microsoft Teams format. So we have a plethora of stars for you to enjoy today, who you can see on screen. Our special guest star is Ross McAllister from Agile Business Process Consultancy. It's not easy to say. And we have 2 gents from SVL Business Solutions that are analytics experts, which is Rohan Newton and Steve Perrins. So what I am going to do now, with a little bit of luck, this is the test. Has he done everything right? And thankfully, I believe he has. So here is a screen that says today is called Accelerating a Smarter Future with Automation. As you say, my name's Paul Gray, by the way. I'm the marketing manager at SVL. Ross and Stephen and Rowan will be your main speakers today, and there'll be a Q&A and a poll at the end with Kahoot. But for further information on that and today's housekeeping, can I pass over to Stephen?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thanks, Paul. So just to sort of follow up there, today what we would ask for some general housekeeping is if you keep your camera and your microphone off, that will allow everybody who's presenting to be able to have contact with you. We will be monitoring the chat function. Any questions, any queries you have, and anything you want to ask us about, pop it into the chat. If myself and Rowan will be monitoring that, we'll get back to you either straight away, or what we'll do is if your questions are good, then we'll keep them and we'll direct them directly to Ross. But also anything that we don't manage to get through today, we'll also hold them at the back end and come back to you directly with answers to anything that you may have. So as Paul was saying, this is the 5th in our homeworking series. We have carried out some great sessions earlier on, and as Paul said, they're all posted up on the SVL company business pages. If you have access, if you go to LinkedIn, you'll be able to follow us at the SVL business pages, and you'll be able to find all the previous events on YouTube and the LinkedIn page as well. So with that, as Paul mentioned, we also have the Kahoot polls and questions ready. So if I could ask for those of you who don't or haven't used Kahoot, if you could either go into Google Play or the iTunes Store and download Kahoot. Takes a couple of seconds and get it loaded up on your phones or your applications, and then throughout or further into the presentation, we're going to ask you a couple of poll questions and just gauge the response to that and give some feedback. So I'm going to hand over to Rowan. Rowan's been sort of instrumental in working with SVL, developing the relationship with Agile and our automation practice. Rowan, do you want to pick up?
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. Yeah, so just a little bit of background for me before we hand over to Ross. So just how did we get here, I guess, and why we're here talking about automation today. So for those of you that know us will know that, you know, SVL are specialists in all things workforce optimization related. So voice recording, quality management, interaction analytics, workforce management and such. And we almost came into the world of automation kind of almost by accident, really, because we found that in order to optimize the various applications that we were providing, it was necessary to do some types of automation, either using APIs and the like, or then latterly with more of the market leading kind of automation tools. So they started with quite simple things, and you know, literally dozens of cases where we might be doing, you know, causing pause and resume for PCI compliance reasons, so automatically triggering an activity based on something that an agent was doing on the screen, and then latterly potentially enhancing solutions by taking data out of one system and moving it into another, to make calls more searchable within call recording databases and that type of thing. Now, Over time, we therefore built experience around about automating the various different applications that we provided, and then we started to move into the world of developing actual kind of RPA type applications, and realised really that that's a really specialist set of skills, and that led us to realise that the way that we would best take this to market was really work with a specialist organisation. And I'll let Ross obviously introduce himself and talk through Agile's particular skill set, but where we come to market really is that Agile are experts in all things automation, and SVL are experts in taking that automation and how we would apply that across the suite of contact center applications that we supply. You click through just to the next slide. So the approach that we take is very much an agnostic one. So that applies to a general approach to the market. So we're not particularly vendor specific. We very much talk to organizations and apply the appropriate technologies to the appropriate problem. And it very much applies to the session today. So this is not pushing a particular product set. This really should be applicable no matter what your underlying technology that you may already have. You may already have automation tools, you may not, but really we're talking today broadly in an agnostic way about automation as a broad subject. So I'll hand you quickly back to Stephen just to go through what the kind of key takeaways are for the day, and then we'll get going with Ross.
Yep, okay, thanks, Rohan. And as I say, everybody's waiting with bated breath for Ross. So what we want to do is sort of have as a key takeaways, is basically just what we've got on the screen, how automation will improve quality management and efficiency on all the processes, or some of the processes that happen within the contact center or within your business. Doesn't have to be contact center related, that happen within your business just now. And more than that, it's being able to free up your agent or your working staff's time, just so that it's getting away from the repetitiveness and the monotony of doing all these repetitive tasks. We all know that within the contact center, agents are becoming more multi-skilled. The queries and the questions that they're getting or being asked are more and more demanding. So if we can reduce up the time to make it more interesting and effective and efficient for them, then that's what we want to try and do. There is lots of different terminology, I suppose is the correct word, around about automation. We'll talk a bit about the attended and the robotic with Ross, and he'll talk about some of the differences in that. And then more than that, it's just sort of giving you some examples of how you can reduce manual processes, how you can identify these manual processes that may be happening in your business and you don't really realise. Some of them you may be aware of, but you don't know how to sort of take the first step and tackle them. So again, with Ross, we'll talk about some of that. And then just making your customer experience a lot better throughout the organisation. One, using your customer experience, but also your agent's experience with the use of automation. So that's going to be the key takeaways from today. And as I said, if anybody's got any questions or any queries, then pop it into the chat, or we can wait until Ross has done his presentation. So without further ado, Ross, we'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Stephen. I was just trying to get myself off mute there. So Good morning, everybody. Delighted to be here today. Also great to see so many people that are attending the webinar this morning. I think one of the great aspects of, if I find positives in working from home or working from remotely at the moment, is having that time back in your diary, potentially to join sessions like this, to do a bit more personal development and learn more about new concepts and ideas. And hopefully what I can provide today as an introduction and a high-level overview of automation. And in its essence, automation is quite a broad term. It covers a variety of terms and I suppose buzzwords as well. You might see them on LinkedIn. But what I'm hoping today is to give you an overview of automation in the context of business processes, so the automation of business processes. So before I get into the presentation, I think it's be worthwhile just giving an introduction to who I am, the organisation that I represent, and I'll also expand a bit on why we partnered with SVL and why I'm here talking to everyone today. I must say it's quite surreal talking here, and I can't see anyone's faces. Usually you're in meetings, you're in conference calls. So I'll do my best to entertain you. If you fall asleep, I won't know, so don't worry if you offend me. But so my name is Ross McAllister. So I work for an organisation called ABP Consultancy. We are a highly specialised automation consultancy services business. I like the word agnostic that Rohan presented at the beginning of the call. We like to think of ourselves as technology agnostic, although I would say often biased in the solutions that we provide to our customers. We are a partner of a number of the big vendors in the market. I think it'd be okay to reference a few of these. So we're an IBM partner. We are a UiPath partner. You may have heard of IBM. You may have heard of UiPath in the robotics space. We're a partner with ABBY. And a partner with Orachain, Dynatrace. We've got lots of partners, but effectively what we do is we can sell technology solutions to customers. We can service those solutions. So a lot of the work that we do for our customers and clients is around helping them find the right fit for a technology solution, whether they're in a contact center, whether they're in manufacturing. So finding the right solution that would fit their needs. And then we often provide the services I suppose to build that out. And when I say services, I mean we offer delivery services. So we've got a strong team of people with literally thousands of hours of technical capability. So they understand how to deploy a set of licenses on an infrastructure, for instance, right through to developing out an automated process. And then we also have part of the company that's consultancy services, which is going into organizations and saying, okay, well, what does the next 2 to 3 years look like? So if you take these solutions, you take these services, what does it look like when you stand on your own 2 feet and you develop your own internal capability? My role in ABP Consultancy is the UK country manager, so probably more of a hybrid role. I look after all customers, clients and partners and people in the UK, and we service all customers in the United Kingdom. But the organisation itself has 4 main locations. So we are based out of Lisbon, Portugal, where our owner and CEO, George Suarez, is from. We have 2 offices in the UK, one in London and one in Glasgow, and we have an office in Dublin. And just last week, we opened our 5th subsidiary in Tel Aviv, Israel. So we're quite excited. We're relatively young. We've been around for 5 years. To give you an example of the growth that we've had over the last few years, when I joined the organisation in March last year, I was the 14th employee of the company. I was the first UK employee of the company. We're now up at over 60 people, or 60 FTE, or colleagues, or whatever you want to call them, all specialists. We've noticed a massive increase in customers and partners and clients asking for help with deploying automation solutions. Last year, we had over 200% growth on profit, people. We had onboarded 38 new clients. So maybe what I'm suggesting, I'm not trying to sing our praises too much, but just to say automation in its essence is going straight to the top of the boardrooms. We'll talk a bit more about why that is, but we've certainly noticed a massive uptake in people asking, how do I do this and where do I start? Okay, is that enough for an introduction? Can I move on? Perfect.
Go for it.
Okay, yeah, I know. You'll need to stop me if I talk too much. Okay, so what I wanted to do is, just before I dived into the presentation and we go through maybe some terminology and what automation is, I wanted to do a bit of an overview on the landscape of business right now. I think this is important because with the pandemic, right, and I would certainly not profess to be an expert in the pandemic, organisations are facing increased pressure. Organisations always face pressure. They always face pressure from many sources, whether that's to reduce costs, to grow, new regulatory and fiscal policy that comes in. When you overlay the pandemic on top of that, wouldn't quite call it a crisis, but organisations are suddenly going, right, how do we either, and we'll talk about this in a minute, stay in business? How do we grow? How do we become more resilient? So what I've put in front of here isn't my words. This is some research from Forrester around the current landscape of businesses. So what they're saying is right now, organisations and business can fit into 3 main categories. So that's organisations who are trying to survive, right? Organisations, you think about the travel and tourism industry, almost on its knees right now. Hospitality in the bar and restaurant industry. Good news from Nicola Sturgeon this week that we're going to maybe start seeing a return to get back to the pubs and back to restaurants. But those have been heavily impacted. They have their own, they previously had their own pressures, but with the pandemic brought it in, they're really, really struggling right now. Their goals usually are to preserve cash, make sure they're liquid, maintain positive relationships, particularly around, if we're not going to do business right now, we want to be in business in 3 months' time when our customers come back and they treat us as valued enterprises. So that's survival mode. I think the main thing there is, how do you stay in business long enough that you could potentially bring automation to the forefront at the right time? The next one in the middle, this adaptive mode, I think this is where the majority of organisations fit into. So that's organisations who have been impacted by the pandemic, but at the same time are having to react and having to adapt. I'll give you an example here of, I've been working with a recruitment organisation in the UK. Their major call centre was in Glasgow. And when the pandemic hit, they had to find, I think it was 2,000 or 3,000 laptops and headsets at short notice to remain in business, to remain resilient. They had customers to serve. They had organisations still looking for people to be deployed into roles. So they were having to adapt. In here, you've got things like industrial manufacturing, construction organisations as well. Some of those were able to perform in the industry. Some sites were shut. But they're now having to change. They're having to be more health and safety aware, and how does that impact their business model? And this also includes automotive industry and financial services. Please note, it's not a definitive list that I'm giving here. These are just examples. They've all experienced major disruption in their operations, particularly to their supply chain, and as I just mentioned there around remote working. Main goals for them is to be flexible, responsive, control their costs, of course, improve cash flow, but how do they become more adaptive, responsive, resilient in the future? And then the last one, just not to get into too much detail, but it's growth mode. So this is your supermarkets, this is Amazon, healthcare, pharma, even education. I've noticed an uptake in organisations providing training services and digital services. They're looking at automation through the lens of, how quickly can we grow? How much more throughput can we get through our processes? How do we grow in a scalable way that's efficient without overloading too much costs? Now, the reason that I'm presenting this to you today is, as you're sitting there, so there's many people that from organisations that I either don't recognise or I've never met before. As we go through the presentation today, I would like you to think a bit about where do I currently sit, or where does my organisation currently sit? Automation can apply to all three of these modes. It could be a slightly different driver that brings it in. But as we go through this today, maybe think about, if I'm in the growth mode, in your head, think about ideas. Where could I apply automation to help the business grow? If you're in survival mode, it maybe, I've got some great ideas for automation. I'm not going to get quite to them yet, but I'm not going to forget about them. And we're going to come back to them in a few months' time, in a few weeks' time, when the time is right. Or if you're in that adaptive mode around, right, we're relatively stable, we need to adapt and improvise. So how can I overlay automation to help our business continue to remain stable but grow in the future? So I'm going to pause there. I believe Paul's got I was going to call it a quiz, but it's a bit early for a quiz.
It's a poll rather than a quiz, I think is what we'll call it. But we are using a package here that we asked you to look at Kahoot earlier. So I'm hoping you've downloaded Kahoot, because we're going to start a very quick two quick polls. I'm going to stop that horrible music going on because that's going to drive everyone says. So if you've downloaded Kahoot, you're then asked for a game pin. So that game pin is on the screen in front of you, 158456. Could I ask you to enter that game pin and give yourself a name? Because that is then, we're going to use this twice. This is the first of the polls, but it's going to help give our speakers a little straw poll to have a little conversation about where the market is just now. So I'm going to give you all 30 seconds or so to, you're doing great. Look at that. We've already got 10 players. Kahoot's quite good fun. You can also use it as a quiz package where you can have people remotely answering questions, multiple choice questions, and it's fastest finger first. If you remember Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, you get points not just for getting the right answer, but for getting the first. This isn't a quiz in this case. This is just us looking at a group of people out there and trying to get a little sense of where everyone is. So we've got 11 people currently logged in. Maybe give it a few more seconds to see if anyone else, if you haven't yet downloaded it, it can take a few seconds.
Just to say, Paul, as well, the results for this will be anonymous, so it's just really we'll get a kind of visual representation of just where where the audience stands, and it just helps guide the conversation a little bit.
Okay, right. So we've got 11 people wanting to play this, so I will start the poll. And here we go. 2 seconds. And if the question we're going to ask you just now is very simple. Based upon what Ross was just talking about, which of these applies to your business? Are you in survival mode, adaptive mode, growth mode, or just not going to count any of those modes, non-existent? And that's 13 answers. Excellent. Gents, I'll let you have a chat about that.
Is that what you were expecting, Ross? I think you're suggesting adaptive mode was the you most expected.
Yeah, and again, maybe this is a indication of the types of organisations and people that we have on the call at the moment. I was going to suggest that, particularly for our customer base, so if you think I've got 38 active clients in the UK at the moment, all at varying degrees of they've bought some licenses, they've delivered an end-to-end programme, or that they're starting a pilot, for instance. The majority of our customers, I would certainly say, are in the adaptive mode. So they're the ones that are saying, we believe in automation, we believe in the benefits, but actually we've got bigger priorities right now. We've got priorities around, we've unfortunately had to furlough some staff, or we are having challenges around cash flow. Really encouraging that we've got 62% here in growth mode. I think that's fantastic. It'd be great to understand some of the organisations behind that. Interesting that no one's in survival mode. I wonder, and this is just an observation, would that have been different maybe 2 or 3 months ago? I don't know, Rohan or Stephen, about your customer base, and is that maybe the results you were expecting?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's hard to say. I think everybody felt maybe they were like in survival mode in the first few weeks of this following lockdown, but people do seem to be adapting and starting to look to business as usual and think about what these changes mean to business going forward. So no, I think that's quite heartening, really.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. From my perspective, customers and prospects, everybody's now sort of, as you say, Rowan, they've come through the pain, and they've now got a new norm, and they're working towards new norm and getting business back to normal as quickly and as efficiently as possible.
Excellent. I think that's going to make the presentation a bit easier as we go through. Not to forget that there are people who are in adaptive mode, and I noticed 2% is 2 people had said non-existent. But that's okay. And maybe you come out the back of this presentation today and say, okay, I understand where I am and understand where we could apply this. So what I wanted to do here, this isn't what the market's saying. They are actually saying quite a lot about what's happening in the industry and the pandemic at the moment. So what I've done is I wanted to go and pull some quotes from either respected researchers, research partners.
Can I just stop you? We've lost the presentation on the screen.
Oh no,
sorry.
Go build.
Sorry. Let's.
It's okay. You just need to click.
Click on the presentation. There you go.
Is that okay, Jess?
No, if you share the other desktop.
No, that's it. That's fine.
No, it's not up.
I can see it fair on my screen. Can everyone else, Ross, can you see that on your screen?
I can see it, yes.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, I'll just hold off. Can everyone see that okay before I start firing into it?
Okay, all right.
It was going so well.
Yeah.
Well, it's gone now, so you go back to the other screen.
There you go. That's us.
Right. Thank you. Okay.
Perfect. Okay, so what I was just saying there was I wanted to represent a view that, yes, I have my own views and I have my own biases and opinions, but what I've tried to do is go to the market, find some respected research partners, or what is the news saying, what's the articles that are appearing in LinkedIn, just so that you know that this isn't just about what Ross McAllister's saying. This is what I suppose respected analysts are saying in regards to automation in the market. So I'll very quickly read this one out now to you that's on the screen. So basically, automation has been a major force in reshaping work since long before the pandemic, absolutely, but it's taken on a new urgency in the context of business risk and resiliency. Go and slightly against what we would see on the poll there about growth, but certainly what we've seen at ABP Consultancy is organisations coming to us and saying, previously the return on investment to automate that process didn't quite stack up, but we understand that if we don't make the investment in automation, bring in digital workforce, bring in robots that can work 24/7 and can work over the weekends, the next time there's a global pandemic, or the next time there's another unfortunate or global incident, we don't want to be in the same place we were 2 months ago. So that one's from Forrester. They've got a great report out that I'm happy to share. That's called the COVID-19 crisis will accelerate automation plans for 2020. I'd definitely recommend reading that. The next one is about a requirement to deliver faster and accelerate initiatives. It's definitely something that we've seen. Previously, if you think to technology programs are usually 1 year, 18 month, 2 year deliveries. Sometimes you're doing integrations even longer. Automation, and particularly, we'll talk about one particular type of automation in a second. We've noticed an uptake, and we need it now, and we need it quickly. So people are coming to us and saying, we need to bring in automation to our organisation, but we can't wait 6 months to get a return on investment, or we can't wait 6 months for that process to live. Can you do it in days, and can you do it in weeks? More often than not, I'll be honest, it's usually weeks, right? Unless there's something really small that you could deliver in days. But certainly we've seen, rather than coming up with 2 or 3 year IT or automation strategies, organisations are wanting that to happen quicker. So that one's from McKinsey. And then the last one was one that I found quite interesting from a survey. It was around 73% of UK business leaders surveyed at the time of COVID-19 believed that COVID-19 would spark a new wave of automation. So that's what I'm seeing right now in our customer base. With a particular dry period a few months ago, I think just people were trying to find their feet. But in the last 2 to 3 weeks, I've had an uptake on organisations asks, how can we help them? Investment will always be a challenge. Equity and capital will always be a challenge, but there's some great things that the vendors and other organisations like ourselves are doing about deferred payments and stretching out payment terms, for instance. But what we've definitely noticed is it's jumped almost to the top of boardroom strategy. And just before you move on, Paul, I just wanted to say that if you think about the way that we are living and working right now, digital is central to almost every interaction. So whether or not you get back to the office in 2 months' time, whether or not your organisation fills an office with 1,000 people, we're all using Teams, Zooms. We're in this digital world, and I think it's forcing organisations further up the digital adoption curve in order to survive, adapt, and grow.
Ross, can I ask you a question? Just regarding the second quote there. Certainly, you know, back in the earlier days of automation projects, days and weeks would seem ambitious. We used to hear a lot from a lot of clients as they started automation projects, and they were months later and still trying to get it into business as usual. What would your experience have been on sort of speed to production, I guess? Yeah,
that's a good question. So I think it depends on the type of automation lever or the type of automation technology that you're trying to bring into the business. But in a couple of slides down, we'll maybe go through some of those types, right? But if I give an example, and one of my ex-colleagues is actually on the call, so I'll be interested to get his take at the end. But 3 or 4 years ago, when we introduced what was the term was robotics process automation to a financial services organisation in the UK, the pilot project for that was about 16 weeks long. So that basically took you from analysing a process, building out the workflow, developing, testing, and then deploying to live. 16 weeks, right? That, and at time, was not classed as groundbreaking, right? But it was the first time that, particularly in the team that I worked in, that we delivered a technology solution in under 6 months, right? So usually these technology solutions were 12 months, 18 months, right? And happy to be challenged in that. What I'm noticing now is because of the market's reaching a certain point of maturity, because you've got organisations like ourselves who've got people who have thousands of hours of delivery experience, if you're able to select the right process and the right technology, you can get working solutions in 2 to 3 weeks. They're not going to be completely end-to-end, right? And I'm not going to oversell this to the point in time that everyone wants to go run out and buy it, because there is a certain realism here. If you're going down the route of machine learning and trialing things like artificial intelligence proof of concepts, I would say absolutely not. That's a long drawn-out period of learning, adapting, finding what works. But the great thing is, and we'll talk about this in a few minutes' time, is there's certain technologies out there that have strong market presence. They've been in business now for over 5 years. There's a wealth of experience where you can, again, selecting the right tasks or processes, get them automated. And if you think 2 weeks is 10 days, so technically it is a matter of days. But if you're doing some more end-to-end, like business process management, for instance, the times do get longer. Did that help explain? Or?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it was always interesting to me when people were trying to automate some things, and the relative savings seemed to be almost overwhelmed by the length of time it took to develop the automation. But certainly from conversations we've had over the months, that does seem to be shortening as the market matures, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I wouldn't just take that for my words. I would do some research. I've tried not to make this too sales focused. Of course, we've got partners. Of course, I've got sales targets. But if you do some, and I'm happy to share some links on, for instance, after the call. But if you do your research on this, you'll find proof of concepts and pilots, and you'll find that the return on investments for certain processes can be achieved in months rather than years.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ross.
Okay, so Paul, we're just going to move on. Okay, so we spoke a bit about how automation has jumped almost to the top of organisations' strategic priorities. Now, I wanted to bring this slide forward, right? When I talk about the benefits, everyone should have a strong understanding of what automation could do for them in the simplest sense. Automation can help lower your costs. It can help increase your revenue. It help with improved customer satisfaction. Getting it right, getting it right for the customer first time, improving your quality scores, making sure if you get it right first time, then your complaints go down, and your cost to service the complaints and your cost to reimburse the customer comes down. Improves employee engagement because you're suddenly taking away manual repetitive tasks from your colleagues and allowing them to usually do the job that they're paid to do, which is to serve the customer, handle complex problems and queries, and be empathetic. Those are all standard drivers. Usually what you find is organisations are very focused on either growth or reducing their costs. When I started in this industry 3 or 4 years ago, it was all about cost reduction. If we automate that process, how much capacity can I save? And from that capacity, I can either deploy that to another team, or I can unfortunately release and create either a labour arbitrage saving or a pure cost saving to the bottom line. What I've noticed over the last year is it's moved towards growth. Then when the pandemic hit, the last two, particularly a renewed focus on resiliency, helping with things like compliance, because organisations are going to go through another period where either it's health and safety compliance that they need to meet, or it's pressure from the regulator, for instance. I've noticed a slight upturn on organisations coming to me and saying, can you help us automate this process because it would make us more resilient, or it would help us with continuity in the future? That's something that I hadn't seen before. I'd love to know if anyone's got any thoughts on that. But usually the prior drivers to that is I want to increase my revenue and I want to lower my costs. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're just going to the next slide. So this chart, graph, or whatever you want to call it, is from that Forrester report that I referenced very briefly at the start. I really like this because what it does is it encapsulates the number of terms that you may have heard before. So as I spoke about, automation is a broad term. Within that broad term, there's a number of facets to that. So you may have heard things like artificial intelligence, digital worker analytics, or workforce management. So Rohan and Stephen, I know you guys do a lot of that, and we'll come back to that in a second. Cloud is a form of automation. Even remote working, so effectively giving people access to log into your systems remotely through VPNs, that type of thing. Those are all examples of automation. But what I wanted to show here is, particularly because of the pandemic, there's been two main areas, so a renewed focus or an acceleration on these types of automation. Now, if you look at the chart here, items that are losing momentum, AI engagement, AI business transformation. The reason for that is typically the investment to get going is quite high. It's a relatively unknown industry. Despite what the sales partners would tell you, right? Despite what LinkedIn says, there are very few organizations who have actually deployed a fully competent and cognitive AI learning algorithm or learning platform. Usually it's in the form of machine learning, right? So those are dropping down because the investment's so high, because the return on investment takes a particular length of time, because it's a learning process. But jumping straight up into the acceleration zone is organisations thinking about things like, well, how do I get my workers to work, not only work remotely, but still to perform ably in their job? And then how do we automate the tasks that they do so that they can actually spend more time serving the customer? Because customers have got real challenges right now. So we need our employees, our colleagues to be more empathetic to them, to be more understanding. We don't want them having to listen to the customer and at the same time trying to populate data into 4 or 5 different systems. And the renewed focus zone is that of which is digital worker analytics that are falling into that space, which is if all my colleagues and are now our employees that are now working remotely, how do we make sure they remain productive, and how do we make sure they're working on the right activities? A bit big brother, but at the same time, if you're paying people to perform in a role, you need them to be productive, you need them to help the organisation grow. I wanted to put this out here because I would like to talk about a particular type of automation, which is robotics process automation. We talk about robotics process automation as robotics task automation, usually because it's the automation of tasks that underpin a process. I'm hoping that the majority of the people on the call have heard of this before. It's all over LinkedIn. You've got a number of big vendors in there. So you've got UiPath, who are currently the #1 RPA vendor in the market. You've got Automation Anywhere. You've got Blue Prism. You've got Photonomy. You've got Softomotive, who've just been purchased by Microsoft. There's a number of large vendors out there who have been selling robotics process automation for 4, 5, 6 years now. It's quite a mature market. It's a great starting point for organizations because you're not asking them to suddenly deploy a brand new machine learning or artificial intelligence algorithm that even the people who are deploying it don't quite understand how it works in principle. What we've got here is a strong number of consultancies, a strong number of vendors who have been doing this day in, day out now for years. So they're starting to learn, they're starting to get best practice, they're starting to get how quickly can you deploy it, what are the main challenges. If I do a quick overview of it, so what is it? Well, robotics process automation, in its simplest term, it emulates a person by executing manual repetitive tasks. So if you think about in your day-to-day work, is there a particular task or process that you do day in, day out, that you think to yourself, do you know, if I had a piece of RPA, if I had a piece of automation, that would make my life a lot easier. One for me would be opening of emails, extracting email attachments and saving them to the right folder. I get lots of things like purchase orders, I get lots of invoices, I get lots of even presentations through, and I spend a large portion of my time opening them up, renaming them and putting them into a folder or file. If you think in the grand scheme of things, right, that's not going to save you thousands of hours. But the beauty of RPA is you can overlay it, you get what's marginal gains. You automate a task, then you automate another one. So the next task might be, I have to submit my expense sheet on one system, and then I have to take that data and rekey it into another system. That then goes to my colleague, who then approves it and then has to rekey it back into the payment system. Robotics is fantastic at things that are low complexity, high volume, high repeatability. It can make decisions based on set rules. So if you've got processes out there where you know there's a if, an and, or an else statement, and you know that those rules are defined, like we would approve a mortgage or a credit card to a customer if they reached a credit score of 500, for instance. If that was the rule, you can program that into the robot and the robot will always follow it. In the purest sense, right, robots do not think for themselves. You have to program them. So they will always execute the code that you apply against them. And what I mean by that is they will never make a mistake if you get your coding right, and it will always perform to 100% accuracy of the code that you've built into it. The amazing thing for RPA is it seamlessly integrates with existing applications. Like many of the people in here and like my previous employer, they had legacy platforms that were around for 5, 10, even longer than that held customer data. It was so much of a risk that they could never replace them, but they wouldn't want to replace them. It would be costly, it would be a time-consuming integration. RPA sits above these. It almost sits on the surface layer. And what it can do seamlessly is take data from one system and repopulate it into another. And it does that with a high degree of accuracy. The great thing for me on RPA is because it's reached a maturity point now, it works with things like Oracle, SAP, SIBO. They've even, some of the vendors as well, started to build plugins. So there's like Microsoft plugins, there's SAP plugins, there's Sage plugins, Xero, for instance. Because they've been doing this for so long, what you're finding is it's getting more intuitive, more user-friendly. You may have heard of the terms in the market, low code and no code. I would say right now, it's RPA is in the low code spectrum. If you have knowledge of Visual Basic, C#, even basic programming language, you can do a lot with RPA, but they're moving very quickly to the no code space. So what that means is drag and drop user interfaces, where if you needed the robot to open Outlook, you could just drag the Outlook component. If you needed the robot to open Excel and extract a particular field, you can drag and drop. So that what they're trying to do for the vendors right now is make it more user-friendly and intuitive. That then in itself improves the speed of delivery, improves the user interface, and makes it, you may have heard of the term citizen developers or citizens ecosystems. What they're trying to do is push that back out into business users, where business users would develop their own automation workflows. Stephen?
So I was just going to say the whole total cost of ownership, and it's, as you say, it used to be seen as a black art, but now the technology is emerging and evolving at such a rate that business analysts can pick it up. And as you say, just using the drag and drop capability makes it so much more simpler, which I suppose is where the adoption, and not only that, the return on investment, because the business owns it, makes it so much more valuable.
Yeah, and if you'd asked me last year, I'd have said they weren't there yet. We previously would only have hired people with a strong development background, so they were either developers in Java, Python, C#, people who, if you think about the green screens and the lines of text and the codes like the film, people that live and breathe that. And the reason for that is because there's a high degree of coding that had to go into it. And if you wanted to connect to an API, if you wanted to connect to a system, you had to come from a technical background. But where the market's now shifting to is making people more autonomous. If you think about the future, our children right now are already starting to learn some basic programming in school. I know I learned it, but it was a slither of the computing course that I was on. But right now it's almost getting pushed up to not quite at the level of English and maths, but it's an absolute requirement for people to know this in the future, because they're going to be asked to write more code for new applications. But with it becoming more user-friendly, it becomes open to everyone.
This presumably means, Ross, that it's realistic for organisations to be deploying this and then be able to grow it and scale it themselves with internal resource, and not constantly having to consume professional resources from third parties. Is that the idea?
What I'm trying to do in our organisation at the moment is lower the cost to serve. So basically, because it did come with an innovative product, there wasn't many people who were certified on it. There was a limited number of people who knew how to do it and do it well. So they commanded either high day rates or high salaries, and quite rightly so, because they had a unique skill set.
Yeah.
Where the market's shifting to is many people are now learning this. What I would say about it, though, is you wouldn't want the business user just deploying automated scripts here, there, and everywhere, right? That becomes real challenges. But that's where the things like, so consulting organisations like ourselves make our money in helping to implement operating models where you can scale effectively and you can scale in a robust and stable way. We'll talk about the types in a second here, but at the same time, if you empower your business users to write their own workflows, and the IT function controls what goes into UAT production, that is a fantastic model that basically allows the bulk of the work to be done by the people who know the processes, and allows your technology or IT function to be the gatekeepers of what good looks like, and to make sure that standards are followed, to make sure that someone isn't automating a process to move money to their bank account type thing. I don't know if that would happen, right? But just as an example, you need to create standards across the business. So just conscious of time as well, right? So this slide here about, okay, so what are the differences? Now, this is the differences of a robotics process automation. We could speak at length about automation in general. I mean, I've probably done another 10 sessions to kind of cover it in detail, but there's three main types to be aware of. The various terms. There's attended automation, there's unattended automation, and there's a new one that's growing at the moment called hyper automation. It was previously hybrid, but the vendors have realised that if I put a nice catchy slogan against it, it's a new product to sell. If you ask yourself, okay, what are the differences here? I mean, you've already read the screen, that's fine, but Unattended automation, if I start there, that was the one that really got the RPA market going. That's the one that requires limited supervision. It executes high volume and repeatable tasks and processes, usually deployed in the back office. If you think about it, RPA started a lot in financial services, and financial services would use RPA to process like BACS payments and CHAPS payments in bulk. It would allow them to process mortgage files. So if a mortgage file had to be rekeyed from one application to another application, an unattended robot would do that fantastically, and it would do it 100% well. It works well for things like application processing, claims processing, data retrieval, data rekeying. Think to yourself about it. It's something that I know is happening, but I don't need to see it. It just happens in the background. A bit like when you put data into a system, you can't always see what's going on there, but it might already be plugged into 4 or 5 different systems. RPA in unattended space is fantastic at that, and that's what it was born out of. Where it's moving to now, and this is quite an exciting space, is attended automation. So attended automation, it acts sort of like a personal assistant. I use this analogy, like, do you remember the wee clip man that used to appear on your Word document? And he would come up with suggestions, right? It's not that. But what attended automation is, it's like a personal assistant. So if you're serving the customer and you need to pull a report or you need to extract a file, if you've got it set up, you can trigger it from keys, or you could trigger it from a click to say, I'm serving Ross McAllister. He needs. I'm looking at his, and I appreciate. I keep going back to financial services. It was where my career started. But I'm looking at his current account, and actually, I need to pull up information about his loan or pull up his mortgage. And you would click or type, and the robot would go and pull that data and bring it forward to you. This is where I think the real power of RPA will move into, because if you can deploy it on people's desktops, if you can train them at a high level on how to use it, they will know which tasks that need automated. They will know the things that they do day in, day out that are real pain to them and actually stops them from doing the job that they do. Attended automation is perfect for the front office. So I mean the front office, contact centres, people who speak to the customer on a daily basis. I put a few use cases here, and I hope I get them right because I can't see them because they're under my face, but insurance, recruitment, contact centres, so that's applicable to any organisation, retail. That's where I see the market starting to shift to. The amazing thing about unattended automation is it's about 70 or 80% of the cost of unattended automation. One of the vendors, and I won't name who they are, their CEO has a vision of a robot for every person. It does not mean a physical robot that would bring you
tea and coffee.
You say tea and coffee. I was going to think beers and wings. It doesn't mean you have a physical robot with you, but it'd be part of a hybrid workforce where you have a human and a machine working in parallel to serve the customer.
I think it's interesting, Ross, because I guess that's where we really started in this, rather than from an SVL point of view, rather than in the RPA space. We really started in the attended space because we grew out of the contact center market. And I think, what's your thoughts on that now with this shift to more home working? Because it feels to me that the ability to support agents and getting rid of tasks and support them having that assistant, maybe when they're working from home they haven't readily got so much assistance from people around about them, would be really powerful. Secondly, as you move forward, you recruit new staff who then begin immediately working from home, having that assistance to work through processes correctly, kind of accelerate that onboarding process possibly.
Yeah, I think it's so powerful. Again, maybe a year or two I told you that the benefits were quite limited because the technology itself was limited, but that's changing. What you're finding now is organisations who'd make a prior investment in unattended automation are starting to explore what they can do. So again, if you think about this robot for every person, right, that's a vision, that's a goal, like putting a man in the moon, and that's going to drive his company forward. That's going to drive sales, right? But in ethos, it's quite a simple principle, which is if you've got a robot, machine, whatever you want to call it, and it's working in parallel with you, your efficiency is going to go up drastically. As long as you program it in the right way and it's doing the tasks that you need it to. It means that you don't need to go out and buy a brand new system or integrate between two systems, because actually the tactical gains or the marginal gains from using a robot to plug data in. So if you think about this, and we'll go to this in a minute, right? I'm quite excited here. But when you use attended, if you think about serving a customer, and at the end of the call, they say, that's fantastic, we'll send you an email with your records and we'll send you the quotes. So for instance, you could click the robot to go and do that for you and then instantly take the next call. So rather than the customer having to, even if it's pre-populated templates or Mr. Ross McAllister, here's your quote, blah, 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 and attach the document and find the file. If the robot does that for you, how many more customers can you serve? How many more problems can you catch because you've been actively listening and not passively listening because you're thinking about, oh God, I need to put that data into 4 different systems. And again, the cost to deploy attended automation is coming down because they realise if I want to put a robot on everyone's desktop, I can't charge £10,000 or £20,000 per annum for it. Okay, I'm very conscious of time. I know people might have a hard stop. So the last one that I wanted to talk about very quickly is, can we just go back a slide? Sorry, Paul. It's hyper-automation. Now, this is a buzzword that you'll see in the industry right now. Hyper-automation is something that we are at ABP Consultant are genuinely excited about because this for us is moving into the medium to high complexity use cases. This is where you start overlaying RPA with things like OCR, optical character recognition. This is where you use machine learning to teach the robots. You think everything on the left side of the screen, the robots are done. You have to program them, you have to train them, and they will only ever do what you ask them to do. And hyper-automation is completely different. What we've noticed is the market's starting to move forward to this because there's a number of organisations who have been deploying RPA over a 1 or 2 or 3 year period, and they're sort of running out of tasks to automate. And what they're saying to us is, we've got these invoices or we've got these purchase orders or timesheets that always come in a handwritten form, or they always come in different. The vendors or the suppliers, they don't standardise because it's their form, and they've got 100 or 1,000 different types of them. Hyper-automation in itself is using a solution to read. This is an example. We're using a solution to read the document in an unstructured way, handwritten, and the robot or the machine still extracts the data and puts it in a structured way and allows the unattended or attended robot to process. This is a move into end-to-end processing. If you've been in the business process management space, if you've been using like IBM or Pega or I can't quite remember the other names, Bizaji, for instance, that's what they sell. They sell end-to-end. The difference between BPM and end-to-end processing in the terms of hyper-automation is the sequence of multiple technologies to get an end-to-end benefit. We're starting to do some fantastic use cases in this space. You probably don't want to start here if it's your first process to automate. This is the move to where the market's going, and this is where you start overlaying things like cognitive machine learning and AI. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so I wanted to finish off with, because I believe, and please get me wrong, the majority of the people on the call are from the contact centre or from back office operations. So I wanted to talk a bit about ideas for the contact centre. So hopefully I've given you a good overview of automation and robotics process automation, and what it can do and maybe what it can't do. I didn't maybe touch on that too much, but if you think about how could it help us, right? So we want to get started in automation. We completely believe in it. Give me some use cases, right? So I've got lots to share. If you look on the screen here, so for me, the biggest benefit was you can use RPA to improve average handling time and average waiting time. And an industry average right now is between 20 and 30% benefits in that. Why is that? Because you can allow your advisors or your colleagues to focus on serving the customer and not focus on the manual repeatable tasks. You can get the robot to do that. So then the waiting times come down because more people are getting served. The handling time comes down because people are getting the right information at the right time to resolve their issues rapidly. They don't need to phone back and load up your queues. As we move towards hyper-automation, you can offer solutions based on personal and predictive insights. Again, the robot, if you start plugging in a bit of cognitive insight, it'll start learning. We've noticed that Ross could be getting a better rate on his loan, actually, because he's been paying here and there's another product. So that falls into that digital next best action space. It'll improve customer satisfaction through net promoter score, ultimately benefiting on your customer reputation, because people will phone up and you have the right information to serve them. They won't be on the call for hours. You won't say, actually, I need to go. Can you just put you on hold while I go check this other system, or I go speak to my advisor to get that information? You will have the information at hand to serve them. It will allow advisors to hand off post-call updates and fulfillment activities, particularly to the back office, to robots, allowing the customers to get the results at the end of the call faster and allow your agents to serve more customers. Ultimately, if you do it well and you do it over a long period of time, it will contribute to a revenue uplift. This is a long period. Ultimately, when you deploy RPA or attended or unattended into the contact centre, it's not usually the main driver is revenue uplift to begin with. But if you overlay the technologies, you overlay the sequences, you'll get an uplift because you'll be able to predict what customers are going to do from a sales perspective. You'll be able to resolve their customer issues, reducing down your cost to serve, getting it right first time for them. And you'll ultimately begin to look at things like generating revenue through next best action. So I'm going to finish off with, because we've got 2 minutes and I'd love to take some questions, but a key message to end with, if I left you with anything, RPA and automation will allow you to remove the robot from your human advisors and allow you to unleash the creativity of your people to solve complex problems, ultimately allowing the robots to handle the day-to-day tasks. Leave you with this one thing is, if you think about what would your organisation look like if every employee had their own personal robotic assistant who handled the manual repetitive work, how many more customers could you serve? How many hours could you get back in the business? And if you get those hours back, what would you and your team spend that time on?
Nice thought to finish.
Yep, I think you're bang on 11:59. I've posted it out. Does anybody have any questions that they would like to raise with us at this moment in time?
I think given how pushed the time are, I think one thing worth saying is, if anybody does have some interest in some further discussions, on a kind of one-to-one basis following this with anybody here, we can certainly arrange that. So either, message us, drop us an email, and we're more than happy to have some follow-ups.
And what we will do is we'll follow up by sending everybody out a link to the recording. And if there is any other questions that come out of it, as Ron said, certainly our contact details are all on screen. Alternatively, just come back through SVL website. So I think, Paul, are you finishing off? Okay, I think Paul might be on. Just a big thank you to everybody for joining us today. Another successful home working event. We will be looking at launching or putting forward our number 6 event in the coming weeks. We're not quite sure yet. We think it's going to be based around about analytics, vulnerability, looking after the well-being of your staff and how analytics can do that. But just to follow up and say that all of our events are recorded and on the YouTube channel. Search for SVL and you'll be able to find us. And again, once again, thank you very much for your time. Everybody stay safe and well, and hopefully we'll speak soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. So, just clicking it. Okay, it is just.
You stop the recording, Stevie.
That's a good point. Well done. Yeah. Stop recording. Forgot all about that.